Hello, and welcome to the show Goldsquadrongays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars loving gays break down each episode of their favorite Star Wars TV shows while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
I'm your other host, Charles Rogers, and I'm very mad at Star Wars fans right now.
Oh, really?
Let's get into this episode.
Wow, what a shocking thing.
I know, it's shocking that there is a week where I'm like, I kind of hate Star Wars fans at the moment.
What do they do this time?
Oh, I think you know. I think you know. So I can't watch. Let's do it like this. Hey, Star Wars fans, come here. We need to have a talk. Come here. I can't watch Mando when it comes out because I have to get up at 6:30 in the morning to go to work. And I can't wake up at 5:30 in the morning every week for 8 weeks. That's just not possible. If you are going to post things online about an episode or a particular scene or a surprise cameo in The Mandalorian, one, those dots on Twitter don't work. Number two, and more especially, if you're gonna post the scene on TikTok, put about 5 seconds of a spoiler warning in front of it. It's not hard. I use TikTok. I know how easy it is to slap the spoilers in 3 text on your video. That was how I was spoiled like about 3 hours before I was able to get home and actually watch it, is I was scrolling through TikTok, and my TikTok FYP doesn't have a lot of Star Wars on it. You would actually be surprised.
That is weird because I have both of our TikToks on there. Like I have my private one that I don't actually post anything. I just use to scroll. And then I have the one that's like our actual Gold Squadron Gays account. And we have a ton of Star Wars stuff on that one. But on my actual one,
that's where I normally see it.
Yeah.
Is if I'm on the Gold Squadron account, which I rarely am, or like a Star Wars creator, but my FYP doesn't tend to be. Yeah, it just popped right up.
Oh, wow.
Just popped right up on there.
Boo.
And I'm like, God damn it. So that was a beautiful special moment that I could not enjoy because someone on TikTok did not tag their spoilers correctly. And because TikTok is just a random, like, it spits random videos one after another.
Right.
It just spat it right at me. And I was like, oh, God damn it. I would have loved to have seen this naturally, but unfortunately, I can't stay up till midnight or wake up at 5:30. So thanks for that, y'all. It's like the Bo-Katan thing all over again. I will be eternally mad that Bo-Katan's return was spoiled for me by Twitter by someone who lives in like a European time zone. And so it had been like 20 hours for them since they'd seen it. And they were like, oh, a full day has elapsed. I can post this. No, it's only been like 12 hours in the States. Calm down. I feel bad because I think I still have that person muted because I keep forgetting to go in and unmute them. Oops, because I muted them after that.
Right.
Oopsies. Anyway, nobody spoiled the Bad Batch for me this week.
Isn't that nice?
It is nice when no one spoils the Bad Batch for me. It is great. Shall we talk about this episode of the Bad Batch that I went into completely unspoiled?
Absolutely. Let's talk about the penultimate, essentially, episode.
Penultimate week. It's not the penultimate episode.
Week. You're right. I should specify the penultimate week, not the penultimate episode, even though technically I'm going to count the finale as a part 1 and part 2 of the same episode. Episode 14, titled The Tipping Point, I should say, where new information has our heroes taking on a dangerous mission. Charles, what's one thing about this episode you like and one thing you did not?
One thing I liked is that they really did bring in stuff from a lot of the other episodes in to sort of show how it's all leading up to the events of the finale. I did like that it made it feel more like the season was telling a cohesive story and less that it's like there's a random series of disjointed events. However, it goes hand in hand with the thing that I didn't like, which was this was very blatantly a moving things into place episode. And it almost felt like to the detriment of the episode. Like, I can't explain to you the plot of the episode because there is no plot. It is a series of scenes showing how the plot of the back 2 episodes ends up happening. No one makes any real character choices. No one changes or grows very much as a character. It's mainly, here's how we move from where we were at the end of the episodic content to the narrative content that we're going for. So I did think the episode was a little thematically weak in that it didn't have one. But everything just taken on its own merits I really, really liked. What about you, Bradley? One thing you liked and one thing you did not.
One thing I didn't like, I'm with you on that. It did the episode felt a little disconjointed in the fact that it did feel a little like, oh, we're just setting up the finale. Like it has nothing to do. Like there was no like genuine like problem solution, that happened in this episode. But it was I mean, it was okay. I don't think it was like that egregious. It was just okay for me. One thing I really liked was the return of Hauser. That's probably about it.
Yes.
That's all I can say. Just the return of Hauser. I like because I love his color
Daddy's
palette.
back.
So yeah, I mean I don't think he was wearing his color palette in this episode, but I enjoy his original color palette. I just like him. And I like his haircut. I don't know. I just like everything about him. I like him.
He's very like daddy clone. Like,
Yeah.
yes. Like older silver fox, like kind of clone.
Exactly.
I have thoughts. I have feelings. The thoughts are Hauser, call me. I am available. Well, let's dive right into the episode. So they depart from a planet. We will get back to what planet this is later when it is mentioned. And yes, we do in fact see Daddy Hauser being escorted onto a ship. Now, I thought this was the guy from the Outpost, because they're both blonde Imperials.
Right.
It's not. It's a different guy named Captain Pierce. You want to know who's voicing Captain Pierce?
Yes, please.
Captain Pierce, we've heard him before. He's been on the show. He is a guy named Ben Diskin, and we know Ben Diskin from being the voice of AZ3.
Okay.
So that's the guy who's voicing this Imperial officer. There's a large voice cast in this episode, but we've already discussed all of them.
Oh, okay.
Except for that guy. Yep, Ben Diskin.
Nice.
That's who's playing this. I don't know if we went into him when we did AZ3, but long storied career of doing many different things. His IMDb rules. Just go check it out. I don't have time to go through all the things he's been in.
Right. Oh, I was gonna say also he's kind of a twink.
He is kind of a twink.
Just to throw that out there. Like, I just
yeah, no, that's
yeah.
important. If you pull him up on, he's nearly 30 years of voice acting experience, but he still looks like a twink, or at least the photo they're using on IMDb.
Right. Yeah. Who knows what he genuinely looks like now? But as his IMDb portrays him as a twink.
He's very, very twink. Yeah, I like it. He's a very pretty man in this photo.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I just realized, because I was scrolling down, because I was like, well, if we're going to talk about him for a minute, I might just see if I recognize anything. He's the voice of Haida in Agretsuko. That's perfect. You've never watched Agretsuko, have you, Bradley?
I just know that it's related to Sanrio in some way, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's Sanrio characters, but they let them... It's a very good show. My boyfriend and I just marathoned all of it. I highly recommend it. I also recommend the use of Gozanti freighters, which we are seeing.
Okay.
I don't know. That was my segue back into
great.
actual episode.
Get back into it.
Get back right into it. Yeah, we got some Gozanti freighters. We remember those from Mandalorian and Rebels. And then we also get, when they start boarding the ship, we get our favorite sound, the Imperial klaxon. Now, there is a thing that happens in this section of the episode, which I thought was really funny. And that's, so Echo busts out and he's shooting the TK troopers, but he's stunning them. Echo, why are you stunning the stormtroopers?
I did notice that, and I put it in the back of my brain when we were watching it, like, that's a little weird, but I didn't think much of it until now you brought it back up. I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't add up.
Yeah, he knows they're not clone troopers. Like, there's no need to stun them.
This goes back into our argument of like they just like randomly pick and choose when they want to be violent and not violent. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense when they decide that they want to have the Bad Batch be these like pacifists who just want to stun everybody, or they just want to have them go out guns blazing. It's a little inconsistent. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You know who does make a lot of sense to me? Gregor tossing the grenades up and then shutting the door. That was funny. I liked Gregor this episode. He was barely in it, but I really liked him. There's two guys with them. One of them's name is Fireball. We've never seen either of these clones before. One of them's name is Fireball. The other's name is Nemec.
Interesting.
We're not to be confused with Karis Nemec from Andor.
Why would they do that, you think?
No idea.
That
Two separate
confusing.
creative teams coming up with the name Nemec for a character.
That is strange. But again, is this like another situation where they didn't consult the Bible of Lucasfilm and then be like, oh, did we already use this name or did we not use this name or whatever?
I think they didn't ask anybody before they did this whether or not it was a name that had shown up elsewhere. But like, so here's the thing that you have to understand about the Lucas story group, right? Is there's a lot of misconceptions about how Lucasfilm works creatively. The story group is not like a Bible that they have, where they're like, you are required to follow in these specific lines when you do a Star Wars project. And this is where we've run into issues with them before, looking at like the first scene of Bad Batch or Rise of Skywalker conflicting with Poe Dameron's already established backstory, and then they had to go in and fix that. It's not like creatives are required to go consult the story group, it's just a thing you can do. And it's also possible that, because it's not like the whole story group deals with every single project, it's also possible that whoever it was that was working with story group on the Bad Batch wasn't the same person who was working with Andor. So it's probably just a case of two separate groups came up with the name Nimic, especially since both of them would have been in production around the same time.
Do you think that this would be an opportunity for Lucasfilm or Jon Favreau or whoever to kind of like establish a team of some sort that is on every single, they are literally just like a couple people on every single show, and then they kind of just monitor the story and just make sure that no one is conflicting stories, basically?
I do wish, I don't think Favreau would have anything to do with that. I do wish that they were a little more aggressive about story group at times. I understand, look, I understand it's a mythology, not a history. Some things are going to conflict. That's fine. It's about telling the best story. I do wish they were a little more like, we would really like you to take this to story group and make sure that no one else has done this. Because it would have been really easy for somebody to point out to them, hey, we've already kind of done Kanan and Order 66 in the Kanan the Last Padawan comic. Or like, and I suppose it's something too with the attitude of the creatives at Lucasfilm, because they're we're making a mythology and things aren't going to line up, which is why Dave Filoni felt like he could go and do his version of what happened with Ahsoka after Order 66 that kind of was the same but not really of the Ahsoka novel. I don't know. I wish more creatives there made more use of the story group.
I agree. I mean, it's different when you have something like Andor, which is a little bit more of like we can kind of run with it because these stories have never been told, or this right. section hasn't been told yet. So it's fine. You don't really have to consult necessarily. But when you go backwards in time to stuff like Bad Batch, where it's taking place during essentially a time where, now that it's taking place essentially before Andor, but Andor was made before Bad Batch 2.
It's confusing,
it's very confusing
and complicated.
Yeah, it's hard.
I do, yeah, and I mean, the thing with the galaxy is it's so big that there's so many different stories you can tell that don't necessarily conflict with each other. But I do wish that they would communicate a little bit better about, like, is this a thing that already exists? Like, there was something, not to bag on Rise of Skywalker, but there was an interview where somebody was talking about, oh, I like to think of Exegol as like the home world of the Sith or the something world of the Sith. And I'm like, we already have that. It's called Moraband. It was in Clone Wars. Before that, it was Korriban. Kind of a big deal. A lot of people know what Korriban is. So I like my headcanon fix for that is I've always imagined Exegol is like a Sith throne world. Not necessarily where they came from, but a world where like Drummond Koss, we don't have to get into all of that. But yeah, this is a lot of discussion out of someone having the same name. Anyway, I wish more creatives would use story group. Not feel like they necessarily need to like be 100% bound by everything other people did, but talk to each other. Maybe right. It would help things go down. Look how good Andor and Obi-Wan Kenobi were by working with previously established material.
Exactly.
Speaking of previously established material, so the guy like zaps himself with the like electric cyanide pill.
Yep.
And I have in my notes, this is less shocking than it used to be.
I think it's because the first time we saw it, we were like, oh shit, like that's not something that we've ever really seen. And now it's just kind of like, we've seen it before.
Correct. We've seen it twice before.
Yeah.
It's less shocking than it used to be.
Shut up.
Here he is. He just got it.
Didn't.
I'm so funny. I'm so funny and witty and clever and good looking, and I have a 401k and a working car. Yeah, I just have in my notes the opening 5 minutes are just really good. Like it's really solid Star Wars.
It's very exciting. We like it. I mean, honestly, even though the Suicide Shocker thing is expected, it's still a nice cap to the whole entire events that are taking place.
I like the pace of the opening 5 minutes. I like that we're dealing with Echo and Rex. I like that Hauser is there, and Gregor's there, and we're getting some more time with these characters, but I like it. I like that each character kind of gets a moment. You know, Gregor gets a moment, Rex gets a moment, Echo gets a moment. Everybody kind of gets a moment during this little heist. I do like that a great deal. My next note is the shot of Mount Tantus with it, because they're going to jump over to Mount Tantus. I have This Is Pretty even on my computer.
Ooh, okay.
Because, oh my god, this animation.
Yeah, because they did this one at night now.
Yeah, this is like this beautiful night shot, and it's like kind of raining, I think, a little bit.
Right. Comparatively, when we first saw Mount Tantus back in season 1, where it's this gorgeous daylight kind of, you know, you see the mountain peak in all its glory in the bright sunlight. Now we're getting like this almost evil kind of like everything's dark and rainy and gross. I like it.
I love it. I love it. It's so good and atmospheric. Like, they really are just showing off at this point.
Oh, yeah, of course. Because when they have time, now they're like, you know what? Let's just enhance this scenic shot a little bit more.
Let's throw a little more weather effects on there.
Right, of course.
So Crosshair is being like strapped to a table, and Emery Carr is like, the doctor will come in and see you. There's also a bit where Crosshair walks by clones. This is our first sign that clones are being taken to Mount Tantus, which we will find out confirmed in later scenes that all clones are being taken there. And I have in my note, oh, this guy is Joseph Mengele. This is not even being subtle.
Okay, so for those of us who were not born...
I knew you were gonna ask me who Joseph Mengele is. So I am aware that we are an E for Explicit podcast. I am aware that we have a lot of history people in the audience. So I am going to attempt to explain this in as least traumatizing a way as possible.
Okay.
Joseph Mengele was a Nazi doctor who did a bunch of really fucked up human experimentation. Like, unbelievably fucked up stuff. I believe he was stationed at Auschwitz. But I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head which concentration camp he was at. But he performed really horrible, horrible experiments on prisoners. And he is pretty famous for being the worst, like, Nazi doctor war criminal for all of the extremely messed up stuff that he did. And Dr. Hemlock seems to me like a very, like, Star Wars-y, this is appropriate for kids version of that.
Like a
particularly
veiled, like,
later.
like, here it is, yeah.
There'll be a note later, but anyone who knows anything about World War II will immediately clock, oh, this guy is Joseph Mengele. That's who this is supposed to be. It's supposed to be his riff on this horrible, terrifying doctor. Because even the way that, I think it's Jimmy Simpson plays him, even the way that they're playing him is kind of in line with how Mengele was described by people who interacted with him. So yeah, they're not even being subtle. That's who this is. Also, I did find out what happened to his body after he died, and that did make the fact that I had to read the rest of the article about what he did a bit worth it. He does eventually die. He dies by drowning. He has a stroke while swimming and drowns. Which is correct. And, well, actually would have been correct if he was executed for his crimes against humanity, but he does die, which is good. There's a whole, like, his body disappears for a whole bunch of years, and then they eventually find it. Nobody wants this body. Nobody wants his body. So it gets donated to, like, this Brazilian medical institute and is now used as a teaching aid.
Okay.
This guy turned into like a classroom skeleton, which...
Oh, okay. Interesting.
There's your fun fact for the day.
That was fun, I guess.
I did tell a group chat with Aaron in it. Hey guys, you're never gonna guess what happened to Joseph Mengele's body. So we all had some good enjoyment at the fact that his body is now being used by actual scientists doing actual science.
Nice.
And not horrible Nazi monsters who should burn in hell for all eternity for their crimes. That was a tangent. Moving on. So, not Joseph Mengele here is like, tell us where the Bad Batch are. I need to compel the scientist to work. And Crosshair's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And in my notes, I'm like, yeah, he really doesn't know.
Isn't that so unfortunate when you don't actually know the information and they still torture you anyway?
Exactly. It's like, we will torture you until you give us the information. Okay?
Okay.
Well, he does basically say, like, well, you know how they think. I think they're doing the thing where they're going to torture him for a little bit and then see if he gives the information over. over, but it never gets that far. So they're getting ready to do this, and then one of the troopers mentions that they lost a prisoner transport that was leaving Balmora, which is our planet from the opening.
Okay.
Pause, because that name made me perk my ears up, because I know Balmora. Balmora is a major planet in Star Wars The Old Republic. It is the third planet you go to as an Imperial character in the base game, and it's like the 7th or 8th planet you go to as a Republic character. But then I believe it was also in Dark Empire. Let me check. Yeah, it was also in Dark Empire 2. Which is where it actually originated. So Balmora is generally portrayed as a very war-torn planet, and it's pretty accurate to what we see in the episode. So we zip over to Coruscant, and my note says, we're really just tying it all together, huh?
Yeah, this is where it made me go, oh, so every character that we've met so far along our journey is going to come back in the finale, basically.
Yep. They were like, oh, what if we did some actual, like, connective storytelling?
I was not expecting Chi-Chi to show up, but there we go.
Always nice to see Jennifer Hale. Always nice to see Jennifer Hale. Speaking of Chi-Chi, there's a little moment where Chi-Chi, like, puts her hand on Echo's shoulder, and I'm like, do I ship this?
Don't say that. Oh, damn it. Now it's going to be a thing.
It's almost certainly a thing.
It's probably already a thing.
It's almost... Chi-Chi used to get shipped with one of the clone characters. I think it was Fox a lot. I think she used to get shipped with Fox a lot back in the Clone Wars days. I might kind of be on board with the Echo Rio Chi-Chi ship.
Can we just let characters not be sexual? Like, can they just like live ambiguously and they all are
no, because I'm a fan on the internet. Well, they don't have to bang, but they can be dating.
Well, it is a kid's show, so they are not indefinitely banging. They are just holding hands.
Not according to the internet. Clearly, Bradley, you have never been to AO3. Clearly, you don't know what's happening in those dark depths.
Honestly, the only fan fiction I've ever read is of Tom Holland, and that's about it. Like, I've never read any other fan fiction. I don't proceed to ever go into that kind of stuff. But
fan fiction. I don't want to think about the amount of fan fiction I've read or fan art I've seen or anything from my Tumblr days, really. I prefer not to think about my Tumblr days. That's back in the past. We don't need to talk about... There's a lot we don't need to talk about, okay?
Okay, wait, that's already... I came up with a new idea. It's a podcast where all you do is read Star Wars fan fiction. You just read it. That's it.
So...
You do voice acting work for the Star Wars fan fiction.
So our friends actually over at the Divas Patreon. If you join the Divas Patreon for $5 a month, one of the perks you get is Steph reading smutty fan fiction.
That's amazing, and I need to listen to that as soon as possible.
Steph reading smutty, dirty fan fiction.
Maybe we should do that. I think I'm gonna steal that idea. We should probably do that.
She's a better voice actor than us.
Yeah, but is it really about the voice acting, or is it about getting, horny?
I don't know. I don't know what people are reading smutty fan fiction for. I know why I'm reading it.
There you go.
But that's between me and God. One day I will stand before the throne of heaven and have to account for all of my sins, and we're going to be sitting there for a while.
They're going to go, so did you read this, Thrawn, and who is this character that he's fucking in this story?
Well, you'll have to be more specific, because I've read quite a few.
Gross.
Anyway, those are all of my notes for this scene. I mean, it's nice to see Rio Chi-Chi. It's nice to see Hauser.
Yep.
I could see Echo and Rio Chi-Chi going out on like a coffee date.
Sure.
I could see this. Back over on Mount Tantus. So here's a question that I wanted to pose in light of Emery Carr's face at the end of the episode. Do we think she let Crosshair go?
I was thinking that when I was watching the episode. I thought she was like being like a double agent of some kind, and she was kind of like, okay, I'm just gonna loosen the strap. I'm just gonna let him go, or like make a fake attempt where like, oh no, he escaped because he got the drop on me or something like that. Like, I think she did it on purpose.
I also think she did it on purpose. I think she's she's a sympathizer who's feeding information. I think she's working against. It's almost certain we're gonna learn who she is. She has shown up way too much to not be important.
I think so. I think you're right. Yeah, because it just seemed weird that she just kind of like, she's like, oh, there's no need to, what does she say? Like, we don't need to straighten his restraints or something, tighten his restraints or something like that. She's
she tells him to tighten. Well, she says we don't need to keep torturing him.
Oh, we don't need to keep torturing him. That's what she said.
He's gonna die. If he dies, he can't tell us anything.
Right.
And then she's like, she leaves the restraints, and then she's like, y'all go tighten the restraints.
Okay.
I'm like, suspicious.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
My note here is just this music is excellent. I really like the Kevin Kiner's music on the show. Like, I particularly highlighted this bit where Crosshair's trying to escape. Crosshair attempts to escape, sends out a message to the Bad Batch on a comm frequency, and then is immediately recaptured by creepy doctor guy, who's quickly turning into one of my most hated Star Wars villains.
Which is definitely a good thing.
Definitely a good thing. So we ran a test episode when we were figuring out like the Zoom stuff and all of that. We actually ran a test episode where I brought on Jordan, who's the artist who does the Gold Squadron art. She doesn't really know anything about Star Wars, but I walked her through who Dr. Cornelius Evazan is. And at the time, Dr. Cornelius Evazan was the worst medical malpractice criminal in Star Wars. I do think Dr. Royce Hemlock may be being worse. Like, he may eclipse Dr. Evazan, and Dr. Evazan made the Decraniated, which is unbelievably fucked up.
I just like how Hemlock seems to be like, he's definitely smart in the fact that he's not evil. He's just really, really smart. You know what I mean? Like, he's serving himself. He's not necessarily serving others, which is why like doctor characters are always so interesting, because, you know, everybody knows that doctors have a god complex. And this character seems to be like, oh, well, he's always one step ahead of everybody because he, like, for example, he has this toxin that he's already inoculated himself with. And he's like, well, whenever I need to knock somebody out, I'll just release this poisonous gas in the room, and then
I feel like you have a lot of opinions about doctors. How many of your exes are doctors?
Not enough, fortunately, because otherwise I'd be set for life and I wouldn't have to be working, and then I'd be happy in my my current situation.
Wow. Okay. If there are any doctors in the audience that are into
Star Wars, I guess that's
into
really
Star Wars loving twinks,
I
can give you Bradley's number.
That's really the only requirement.
Slide into Bradley's DMs if you are rich and you can put up with a lot of Star Wars conversation.
And no like weird, like, no children doctors. Like, I don't want no pediatrics, like none of that
no
shit.
Pediatrics.
I don't want you to be a child. I don't want no family doctor, no children's doctor. You have to either be like a surgeon or like a plastic surgeon or like something really cool, like an emergency room doctor or something, you know?
Oh, you don't want to date an emergency room doctor. Trust me. You do not want to date an emergency. You want like a plastic surgeon. You want like a plastic surgeon, or you want somebody in like orthopedics.
There you go. Yeah.
Something, one of those like specialty doctors. That's the one that you want.
You're right. I want a specialty doctor. I don't want anybody
You want the doctors
else,
whose offices are open like 9 to 6, who don't have to work outside of that.
Closed on the weekends, everything.
Closed on the weekends, closed on holidays. That's
100%.
what you want. Because you know they're still making bank.
I'd also take a dentist, because then I wouldn't have to pay to ever go to the dentist again. That would be great. Thanks.
Yes, that is true.
That's kind of a top tier requirement for me. And also, I
have dental insurance, so.
Well, that must be nice for you.
It is very nice. I keep reminding all of my millennial friends that I have dental insurance and watching their faces seethe with like rage.
Yeah, they're like, wait, what is that? No, that's my only requirement. My other only requirement is they can't be a Nazi doctor like this one. So that's
no war criminals, please.
Yes, that's
no horrible experimentation doctors. Just not Nazis are bad. Like, just stay away from me, please. Thank you. So we zip back over to Pabu, and I have a note here. Do you remember way back in episode 4, we were talking about, we think that this might be unique models in the crowd? Because you remember how, it's been a while since you've watched it, but do you remember how in like the Mandalorian episodes of Clone Wars, there was like 3 different character models, and that was it? So all the crowds were like the same variation of blue-eyed, blonde, white people. Like, they were all the same character model.
Yes.
I looked at some of these scenes on Pabu, and it feels like every background person is a unique model.
I mean, I would hope so, only because like I feel like that's somebody's job, right? Like literally their only job is to design background people. Yeah.
But it used to be because you have to design them, you have to animate them, you have to rig it up, you have to get them lit properly. That's why they keep doing like copy pasted one, or they do aliens where they can make them all look basically the same.
Where they take a Rodian and they just change the color. And they're just like, well, there you go.
I think that a lot of these background models in Pabu are the different people, which is incredibly impressive.
I'll have to go back and look.
Yeah, it's I looked to see if I could spot any that were the same, and I couldn't spot any. It was really quite impressive. A lot of diversity of skin tones and aliens and humans and all of that. I do really like that. Speaking of diversity, it's time for Whose Goddamn White Baby Is That? The part of the show where I tell you whether or not I rolled my eyes at how white the Bad Batch appear on my screen on my HD TV in the dark, which is about the best way you can watch this. My focus this time was on Hunter, since he gets the most directly lit scenes. Depends on who he's standing next to, because when he's talking to Shep, and he's in the scene with Shep and Wrecker and the other characters, looking pretty white there, buddy. Put him next to Echo. And I'm like,
fine.
He looks fine.
Right.
So it depends. It's the context of the scene, the lighting, and who he's next to. Tech, I think, didn't spend a lot of time not on the ship, but we also know how I feel about Tech. And Wrecker looked fine. Omega also looked fine to me. There was no point where I was like, whose goddamn white baby is that to Omega? But so I'm gonna give this episode I'm gonna give it a B minus.
Okay. I like that.
It's room for improvement. I don't think any episode has gotten an A thus far, but it's definitely not one of the most egregiously awful ones that I've seen. So that concludes Whose Goddamn White Baby Is That? Tune in next week for the final installment of How Fucking White Are These People?
And that brings us to our next news section called Gonky Watch, where we just point out the fact that Gonky exists.
And now it's time for Gonky Watch, the bit of the show where we remind you that Gonky is in the show.
Yep,
there is a shot of Gonky sitting behind Tech and Omega.
Perfect.
That has been Gonky Watch for this episode.
I'm glad that we bring him up from time to time, just because
it's important to remember. Look, if AZ3 is going to get shafted,
right?
Which they just left AZ3 with Sid,
which is unfortunate because now we know where that storyline is going. That doesn't bode well for AZ.
No, I'm a little worried.
Yeah,
I feel like they wrote AZ surviving and then didn't know what to do with him.
Right? They just kind of went, oh. Yeah, he did survive because otherwise it would have been really sad.
Here.
Yeah,
he's around here.
Yeah.
Oh well. Speaking of people who are just kind of around here, I do have my note. The conversation with Hunter and Shep is interesting because, especially when we see Wrecker come up in the background and he's fitting in really well with island life, and it's like, okay, yeah, they genuinely would be really happy if they stayed here. But even Hunter's starting to get his cold feet in his Hunter way because he won't commit to anything fucking ever. And I'm like, dude, everyone would love to stay here. They would be really happy. Why are you being weird about this?
And it's annoying too because Shep brings up the fact he's like, well, when he says like you guys could be here, and Hunter's like, nah, we're soldiers, we can't do that. Clearly Wrecker doesn't give a shit about being a soldier because he's being very useful to these people, like, and he's fitting in perfectly.
Shep also asks, like, when Hunter says, oh, we're just soldiers, and Shep's like, is that all you are?
Right.
And that's sort of the thesis statement of the entire show. All 2 seasons of the show so far has been, what are you when you are not a soldier? So I think this conversation alone is really important for this episode and then for the overall arc because it's kind of the thesis statement of the show. Who are you when you are not a soldier anymore? My next note is, Omega is so flying that ship in the finale.
Oh, yeah.
Because we've had the ship flying as a theme throughout the entire season.
Mm-hmm.
So she's definitely going to fly that in the finale. She's going to execute the tech turn in the finale.
There you go. Yeah, why set it up if they weren't going to use it? So
exactly.
I totally agree. Yep.
I have here poor Gonky. And then I also thought it was really funny when Tech kind of stumbled out of the ship.
Right.
When they land and Tech's kind of like, whoa. I thought that was very funny. Echo gives Tech the data to decrypt, and then Tech's going to go and do that. Cut back to Mount Tantus. Royce Hemlock is having a meeting with Grand Moff Tarkin. This asshole again.
Is he a Grand Moff now? Or is he still Governor Tarkin?
He is Governor Tarkin, and they refer to him as Governor Tarkin. I believe his military rank at this point is Grand Moff. Ooh, that's a good question. This is the thing Charles didn't research. Let's go.
I mean, not that I know anything about military ranking.
Well, military ranking in Star Wars doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Right. So.
Like, at all? That's a good question. When they start having Moffs?
Yeah.
When do they start having Moffs? When does he become a Grand Moff? Because he's a Grand Moff by the time of Rebels.
Right.
Know that
Which
for a
has
fact.
we're not pushing up to that yet. Or are we? Oh, I don't even know the timeline about where we are right now. We're
We're
about
about
a
a
year
year out from
after,
Revenge of the Sith.
so we still got a solid
Yeah.
nine-ish, or no, not nine. Like almost like it's 20 years up until New Hope, right? So
It's about 18,
18 or
18-ish
something.
years.
Got it. Okay. So we're still a solid 17, 18 years out.
If anyone knows exactly at what point Tarkin was promoted to Grand Moff, don't tell me. I don't care.
Right.
I'm sure someone will at me about this.
They
Someone
probably
who
will.
knows way more about Will of Tarkin than I cared to learn. Tarkin mentioned something called the Summit, which is interesting because I thought that the summit in the episode title referred to the literal peak of Mount Tantus, the summit.
Uh-huh.
No, I think it's like a meeting.
Right. Well, you know what's funny is I thought maybe it was both. So I thought it's like a double entendre kind of
Oh
thing, like
yeah,
where
they're gonna
they,
have a meeting on Mount Tantus.
right,
The
like a
question is
summit
being
at the summit. Right.
who's at that? Who's gonna be at that summit?
Right. I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming Palpatine. Is that what they're going with here?
Maybe we know Tarkin, probably Royce Hemlock
Right.
as well. But the question is like, who else might be? Oh, I guess we'll find out. I
We'll
guess we'll
find
find out in a
out.
couple of days.
That's right.
But yeah, it was because they've had them before. There was a big meeting. That was the whole plot of the D Squad arc, was that there was going to be this big meeting, and it turned out that there was a separatist attack planned on it. And then that obviously got foiled by the droid squad. Some other stuff happened, and I prefer to not think about the D Squad arc.
Well, you know what? Now I'm thinking about it. Hemlock's going to be briefing at the summit. So I'm assuming what that means is he's going to be like, hey, Palpatine, here's how we can clone your stupid body. Like, that's basically what they're going to, I'm assuming what they're
I
doing.
wonder if that's what the summit
Yeah,
is
I
going to
think that,
be. It's going to be
like,
Palpatine and Masameda and
yeah.
or just like Palpatine and Tarkin coming out there to be like, oh, you
Did
know
you
what
all figure it out
you
yet?
know what
Yeah.
I just had a really horrifying thought? You know who might come to the summit? Darth Vader.
Oh.
Darth Vader, who knows who Echo is
Oh, interesting.
and has worked with Rex for the entirety of the Clone Wars.
That is interesting.
Yeah, Vader could very. I don't want to be like, oh, is Darth Vader going to show up in this? Is Darth Vader going to show up in that? Is Darth Vader going to show up in
Right.
Andor? I think there's a better than likely chance we see Darth Vader just because we have enough people connected to
Right.
Anakin Skywalker in the Bad Batch
Yeah.
that it's entirely possible we may see Vader before the end of the show. If not the end of this season, then by the end of the show, we may see Vader.
Right. And I don't think that that's a weird thing to introduce only because of the connections to Anakin Skywalker.
Right.
Like, I think it makes sense and it's not like
It makes
fan
sense
servicey.
here.
Like, it makes sense.
If he showed up in Andor, that would have been weird and fan servicey.
Right.
Because he really has no reason to be involved in that story. If
Mhm.
Rex gets involved, that gives Vader a reason to get involved.
Right.
I don't know. I do think it's possible.
Yeah.
Hemlock basically says, send me all of the clones so that I can do my experiments on them and find ways to, deal with them. And again, I have in my notes, in all caps, not even subtle. Congratulations, Jennifer Corbett, on having read a history book. I know exactly what you're doing here.
Mhm.
It is very obvious who this is supposed to be. If I didn't say it before, don't Google what Joseph Mengele did. Just take my word for it, unless you have a very strong stomach.
Right.
Don't go Googling. Just know that he was a Nazi and bad. And just take this version with Royce Hemlock. Just go with this. You don't need to know what the real guy actually did. It was really bad. Something is mentioned, so they jump back to Pabu, and they're having a conversation on the ship, and the Advanced Science Division is mentioned. Now, I thought, because I wrote it down in my notes, I was like, is that the division that Galen Erso is going to eventually be part of? No, according to Wikipedia, it is a completely separate entity.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find which one. So Galen Erso is going to be part of the Imperial Military Department of Advanced Weapons Research. It's under the direction of Orson Krennic. I do believe it is the one that Galen Erso. This is the other thing Charles didn't research. Galen was not a part of the same Advanced Sciences Division, at least not as we know it. He was, at least according to Wikipedia, specifically he was working for the Tarkin Initiative. Which was something different. I will show up later. Yeah, so Crosshair's being held in this place. It's like probably going to do weird experimentation on clones, but we don't know where it's going. I think it might be going in like they're trying to do the Emperor clones direction, because it seems like Mandalorian right now is trying to explain where Snoke came from.
Right.
They're talking about strand casts, and this, I think, is trying to explain where the Palpatine clones come from.
Right.
Rise of Skywalker. I do like how Tech immediately knows what Crosshair means. When Crosshair's like Plan 88, and Tech's like, oh, that means that they're looking for someone, probably Omega. And I just think it's nice that Tech knows how Crosshair thinks.
Right.
And then we jump back to Crosshair, who's continuing to be tortured by Royce Hemlock. And then we get a shot of Emery Carr looking weirdly conflicted. And that is where the episode randomly ends.
Yeah, it was a weird ending, but I was also like, well, yeah, that's because next week is the actual ending. Like, so it's not really like that weird. I guess they were just introducing everything, setting it all up. And honestly, I don't know how I feel about, like, we've gotten to this point of now what we thought was Crosshair Redemption, but now I feel like it's not even Crosshair Redemption anymore. It's just, are we going to rescue Crosshair or are we not going to rescue Crosshair?
Yeah, I gotta see where it all lands. Like, I like the direction it's going. I like that Crosshair, tried to get a message out to them. I like his defiance. We didn't talk about it, but there's a shot where, right at the very end, where Hemlock's like, are you going to tell us? And he gives like a look forward that basically is like, no, I'm not going to tell you shit.
Right.
So like he's determined to protect the Bad Batch. He's not going to help the Empire anymore. So I want to see where this all lands. I want to see where this all is going. What are your final thoughts on this episode, Bradley?
Final thoughts are, I didn't like like I said before, it felt a little disconjointed, but that's because, again, it was trying to set up the next two episodes. So I'm not going to be so super like invested in that theory or that thought of like, oh, it was not that great of an episode because of this. It was fine. I mean, I think it was just a fine episode. I like some of the returning people. And I do kind of like that they are going in this different direction with Crosshair. I just wish it hadn't taken this long to get to this point with Crosshair. Like, I wish they would have gone a little bit more into it quicker, or just had more episodes with Crosshair to kind of balance out the season a little bit more. But other than that, I mean, it was an okay episode. What about you?
Yeah, we very much teed up the ball, for the final swing. And this really was just the bit where we're tossing the ball up into the air and we're about to hit it, which, these episodes are generally some of the weaker ones. Whenever you watch a show, we're very obviously maneuvering people into place for the final big blowout. But as far as those types of episodes go, it was fine. I liked every scene individually. I just didn't like them overall as an episode. And it may be one thing that changes when we have the final two episodes, and we can watch the entire season all together, because I will marathon it before we do our retrospective. I know it's a weaker episode by necessity, and I'm hoping that a weaker setting things up episode is going to lead to a stronger finale.
I think so.
But we'll see. Alrighty, well, next week we will be back for the final two episodes of The Bad Batch. And then, reminder, we're going to do our retrospective on The Bad Batch. That'll be the week after. And then we will do an episode 0 of The Mandalorian that we recorded several weeks ago prior to watching the first episode. So when you hear our episode 0, it will be what we thought before we saw any of The Mandalorian Season 3. So that'll be upcoming. Keep your ears to your podcatcher and subscribed to this podcast if you want to hear more about that. Also, please rate the show, and also please review the show if you like what you are hearing. It does help the algorithm push us out to more people. And with that said, Bradley, go ahead and run the socials.
Thank you for listening to Gold Squadron Gays. Did Charles fuck something up? Send us a message at goldsquadrongays@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at Gold Squad Gays. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Gold Squadron Gays. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Gold Squadron Gays, where we post the podcast as well as exclusive content. Please join us next week and every week for more of Gold Squadron Gays.
Welcome to the show Gold Squadron Gays, where I talk about all the toys that I collect, even though I don't need to be spending any more money, and I just dropped like over $200, $300 on toys I don't need that I'm going to hang up in my room, and it's going to be really, really cool. Unfortunately, I still don't need them.